All right, guys, what's up? It's Halsey Schider with the Helicopter Podcast, and I am excited to be chatting today. I always say that I'm always excited to chat. I love talking about everything helicopters and aviation. And one of the things that I love about doing the podcast is being able to educate myself. In fact, I've always kind of envied, you look at some of the big podcast names out there, and they're going to talk to all these really cool people that know a lot more about something than they do. And it's almost like this free education that they get. And it's actually one of the reasons I started the podcast was to, pique my curiosity. I've always been a curious guy, and today's episode is really feels like that. And I'll explain why here in a second. But of course, thank you to our sponsors, MHM Publishing, for creating the HeliCASTS platform and making all of this possible. We couldn't do it without you. If you haven't checked out the vertical HeliCASTS platform yet, I highly suggest that you do. And today joining me is Rob Hoffman. Rob is the host of the Crosscheck podcast and the Urban EV podcast. I came across Rob via LinkedIn. I did that weird thing where you just DM a random person and start that conversation. We jumped on a phone call, and here we are today. Rob, what's up, man? Welcome to the Helicopter Podcast.
The magic of networking. Thanks, Halsey. It's great to be on the show.
Yeah, it's crazy. Networking is very easy, quote unquote easy today compared to probably what it was like back in the day. I mean, I can literally just go into LinkedIn, message people, interact with people. I have to say, LinkedIn to me is such a powerful tool for business. Are you using LinkedIn a lot?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, listen, the Crosscheck, it's business aviation podcast, but a lot of it's about growth and development. And in a certain way, nothing can kind of beat in-person interactions. So, belly to belly, shaking hands, meeting people at events and whatnot. But it's so expanded our horizons now, and the ability to network through LinkedIn is absolutely incredible. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that every contact is going to be a quality one, but you can meet some very, very interesting people, like-minded, common interests. I believe you're a perfect example here, how some of my posts here got on your desktop, you reached out, and here we are today. And, we're talking shop. We already had a really nice conversation pre-podcast, and it was really cool. So, yeah, it's LinkedIn, highly recommended to everyone, whatever your vertical. Obviously, everyone here is talking about is in the helicopter space. But, for professional growth, I think it's always healthy to be there and kind of dip your toes in the water once in a while on LinkedIn. Lots of other social media platforms out there are toxic wastelands. I still feel that LinkedIn is clean. It's pure. It's all about business, very little about politics.
It's interesting, too. I mean, this is definitely not a social media podcast, but why not? Something I noticed is that I do like to look on Instagram and Facebook a lot just as a person, right? If there's a downtime or after a long day, I'm on the couch, I'm kind of doing the doom scroll.
Yes.
And when I got really consistent at LinkedIn, and I've actually fallen off a little bit, how life gets, right? Things get a little bit crazy and busy, and then you kind of prioritize. But when I was consistently on LinkedIn every single day, engaging with people, making posts, doing what you're supposed to do, it actually kind of curbed my craving for other social media platforms. I found it really interesting because one of the things that I think I struggle with on top of probably a lot of people is kind of this attachment to my device. It's my lifeline for work. And then at nighttime, it's kind of like if it gets too far away from me, I start to panic a little bit. And, I think actually, daily posting and things like that on LinkedIn really helped. And again, like I said, LinkedIn made this conversation possible, which I think is really cool. I was scrolling through, I came across your podcast, which I always get excited about. I love seeing other aviation specific podcasts to me, the more aviation specific podcasts we have, it kind of boosts the overall brand of all of our podcasts because we can all collaborate together. We can join on each other's podcasts. In fact, pending my baby coming, I'm going to be on your podcast here in a couple of weeks. I have to tell you, we have a date scheduled. June 14th is when the baby is coming.
And our tentative date, I think, is June 11th. So
June 11th.
Be interesting.
So right now we're totally in the clear, but if she comes early, then we're totally, I guess.
How are you going to pass? All right. Well, we'll just make it official right now. Yeah.
You'll understand. So why leading off the show, I talked about this kind of being an interesting podcast for me, right? I think you have 16 hours or so of helicopter flight time.
Yeah, I got stick time in R-22. Yeah.
So I mean, arguably the lowest time helicopter pilot that we've had on the helicopter podcast. But you're a lifelong av geek, your words, not necessarily mine.
Proudly wear that badge. Yeah.
Look, I love that. I talk about that all the time as people say, well, what is the podcast about? I said, well, it's usually two helicopter dorks talking about helicopters. And it's just so true, right? It's like aviation is one of those things that you can truly geek out on.
Yeah.
And we were doing our little pre-interview a few weeks ago, talking on the phone, and we were both kind of scratching our bald heads a little bit of, hey, am I the right guest to come on the helicopter podcast? And then you started talking about eVTOL, and I was like, oh, hey, that's interesting, because that's really a topic that I know is polarizing. So, hey, look, this is media, right? We can be a little risque sometimes and talk about big, scary things like eVTOL. So I thought that would be a really good premise of today's show. But before we start talking about that, AvGeek, I'm curious, one of the things here in your bio is hang gliding.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you're actively hang gliding anymore, but man, I don't know what it is. Talk about doom scrolling. Facebook has figured out my algorithm of I love watching hang gliding videos.
The good ones or the bad ones?
Both.
Yeah. I busted out, for all those watching the video, I busted out my old hang gliding shirt. This thing's got to be
Oh my gosh, I didn't even notice that. I love that.
Just off camera here. This was, literally probably around the year 2000 when I started hang gliding. I happen to live relatively nearby Ellenville, New York, which is a hang gliding center. It's really one of the pioneering landing zones, launch sites for hang gliding in the United States. Reminder that just the sport of hang gliding is basically only 50 years old. Granted, it goes all the way back to Otto Lilienthal. So it was, that's how kind of controlled flight sort of started. But then this whole thing called power came in, and then people just said, well, that's way cooler than actually just do running off a mountain with your feet. So that went by the wayside, and then the modern version got kind of resurrected. In California, and then the Northeast was kind of next in the early 70s. People really embraced it. They didn't exactly know what they were doing. People started dying left and right, kind of fell out of favor. Paragliding right now is sort of eclipsed it now because those things are just basically fit in a backpack. They're much easier. They're much more portable. So hang gliding is this total niche sport. It's going to hang in there. The manufacturers, Wilswing, I think, went out of business. They went bankrupt probably about 5-10 years ago or so. There's a few others hanging in there, but it is truly a niche sport. That said, a buddy of mine had gone to Brazil. In Rio, they hang glide over there off that big mountain, that statue. So he did that.
I just watched the video last night.
Yeah. So it's a really cool place to hang glide. He when he came back, he was looking to purchase a home upstate, and then put two and two together, realized they're hang gliding in Ellenville, and decided, oh yeah, I'll buy a home in that area there, and let me try to get into hang gliding. So when your best buddy's doing it, I'm watching him run off that mountain. I'm like, that looks cool. I want to do that.
Sign me up. It looks really incredible. And it does seem like paragliding is kind of like in right now. That makes sense. I kiteboard. I should say.
Okay. So you're kind of halfway there.
I kiteboard it. And one of the things that is getting frustrating about kiteboarding is all the stuff that you need for kiteboarding, right? You need the board, you need the bar, you need the lines, you need the kite. And then you see these guys walk out there with this little inflatable wing now, and they jump on their hydrofoil and boom, they're gone, right? And it's like, ooh, I want to do that. So I've been kind of rethinking like the simplicity of what I want to do on the water. And I think I want to try to get into, wing foiling and things like that. But it makes sense. The hang glider is pretty cumbersome. I watched a video, I think a couple nights ago, where the harness like snaps off and this guy's like holding on for dear life. I mean, how dangerous really is hang gliding if it's done safely?
If it's done safely, I would say, generally speaking, it's not that dangerous. There, just like there's checklists that you have, although it's kind of all verbal. You don't actually have a physical one there, but you have to make sure that you do a hang check to make sure you're actually strapped to the hang glider. That's one of the things there that you do before you launch.
Like a good idea.
People forget. They forget to hook in. Because you got your harness on and you feel all secure and you're holding on to the hang glider and you forget that you didn't do this. You can't see it. So you have to actually, you lay on the ground, someone will prop the hang glider so it's kind of sitting kind of perpendicular to the ground. And you make sure you're actually hanging and you have free movement. All right, now you're clear. That's one of the things. Then there's that sort of clear prop kind of moment there, or clear before you run off the mountain. There's a bunch of other checks that you do as well, and then off you go. Generally speaking, if you fly in the right conditions, it's pretty safe. I did land in the trees once myself. That was kind of hairy. I did have a toe accident while I was training. That was kind of hairy as well. Towing adds a lot more inherent dangers than actually running off the mountain. So yeah, there's definitely an element of danger there. But if you do things properly, listen, I think with all flying there is, right? We all know that there's some risk involved with everything that we do. Whether it's GA, because I'm also a private pilot, flying a Cessna or a Cirrus, flying a helicopter, that there's certain element of danger, but you're trained to basically properly, pre-flight at any aircraft that you're about to fly in and follow proper procedures. And if you do everything right, you'll probably be okay. So I kind of feel it's along those lines with hang gliding as well.
Yeah, no, it's totally right. Like that's aviation, right? There's always going to be risk, but what our job as pilots is actually not really flying the machine. It's mitigating the risk, right?
Yeah.
Evaluating and then mitigating, understanding, and then accepting a flight or not accepting a flight, right? I'm sure even there's times where I'm kiteboarding and the winds are a little bit wonky or they're in a weird direction. And I'm like, well, I could do it. But if I do it, here's what could happen. Worst case scenario, kite's in the water, I'm in current, and I get hit by a barge. Best case scenario, I have a decent ride, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to go then.
Risk
right? It's
reward.
Like you have to go through that mental checklist, and I think with aviation, it's even further down that rabbit hole of understanding it. In fact, I think something that's really increased the safety of aviation, specifically my sector of helicopter aviation, is this risk mitigation through like a risk analysis. So actually bringing light the different factors that can affect the safety of a flight and giving it a score, right? So when I flew air medical, we had a system, I think it was called Baldwin. I haven't worked air medical for a bit, so forgive me if I'm wrong on the name, but essentially you go in there and you click, did you get 8 hours of sleep? No. Okay, well that's 4 points. And is this a night flight? Okay, yes, it's a night flight. You get 2 more points. Is it to an improved or unproved area? So is it to a hospital or are you going to a scene? Well, I'm going to a scene. So all these different things that can stack up and make a flight orange or red even, right? And so in the company I worked for, essentially if you had a certain score, you had to talk to an operations specialist and had to talk about if the risk was versus the reward. And there were some times where the OCC would say, hey, look, I know that you're saying that you can go, but based on your score, I don't like it, and I'm not going to dispatch you for that flight. Go back to bed, or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that that's really important, and I think that's a huge part of aviation. And it's in everything, right? I was listening to a base jumper talk the other day. I think his name is Jeb Coriolis, something like that. Pretty famous base jumper.
He's really famous, yeah.
Yeah, and he talks about this idea of like, well, he's not really doing dangerous things. He's just really a professional at understanding and mitigating risk, right? There's always going to be risk. There's risk to driving your car to the supermarket. There's risk in everything we do, and we just have to evaluate that. And I think that's one thing that I love about aviation is like that ADM, right? That aeronautical decision making, really using all of your brain power to make sure that you have a safe flight operation. So I digress a little bit, but there's my safety soapbox for today.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
No, but it's a good thing to talk about. I know it's not the topic that we originally discussed that we were going to go down this rabbit hole here, but we called it in aviation basically with fixed wing is go-itis, and I'm sure in the end with Jesus, when you're doing medevac stuff, the pressure there is intense, right? You're trying to save a life, but that pressure you put on yourself, your peers. All right, we're supposed to go here. Famously, JFK Jr. got a wedding in Martha's Vineyard. We're late. We got to get there. Make a bad decision. I'm flying into marginal IFR conditions at night, at dusk. Bad call. It's the same thing with hang gliding, by the way. It takes forever to go upstate, set up the gear, all that stuff. You're sitting at the top of the mountain, and it's twitchy and it's weird. It's not what was forecast. There's a term we used to call hang waiting instead of hang gliding. You're sitting there waiting for the right conditions, and it just sucks to pack it up and not fly when you pumped yourself up, for that entire week. This looks like this is the day I'm going to fly. It's going to be perfect conditions, and it's not. It's tough. It's challenging. We all have to challenge ourselves with that stuff.
What's the saying? I would rather be on the ground and wishing I was flying than be flying and wishing I was on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's everything. Well, I see. Must be a football fan. I know you're on the East Coast over there. I'm West Coast. You're like legit in New York, right? Brooklyn?
Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn. Yeah, which is also the worst place in the world, by the way, to all the listeners here, to be a helicopter pilot, to be a fixed wing pilot. It's just no good. It's no bueno over here because all the GA airports are essentially approximately an hour away with traffic. And it's just it's a pain to get to any airport. And where I did my training in Republic, it was just even once you get to the airport, the traffic on the ground, at the airport itself, just to take off, and in the pattern was also intense. I did my helicopter training in Linden, New Jersey, at a flight school called CORE. At least that's a small airport, so there wasn't much, so you could kind of take off at will. It was, it wasn't towered. Uncontrolled airspace over there, but driving across two rivers to get to New Jersey was a nightmare. So that's part of the reason why I can get into all of that. Why I did not pursue, being a helicopter pilot was I just did not have the time and the bandwidth to train over there. It was just kind of impossible.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that. Actually, I think that I've always lived within proximity of general aviation airports. I grew up, I was surrounded by them. In fact, I was home this weekend, home being where I grew up outside of Portland. And I actually had some friends fly in to come visit, and I picked them up at the old stomping ground where I learned how to fly. And, that was a 15-minute beautiful drive through the country, getting to that airport.
So much better. It's that to me, if I was you, there would be a different conversation we'd be having right now. I'd be a professional pilot.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought about that perspective of proximity to airports. I mean, it makes total sense, right? I guess when you're just so used to having that. I mean, right now where I sit, I could probably throw a rock to the Redmond Airport here in Central Oregon, right? And that's great.
Well, I think this is a perfect segue right now, Halsey, because we wanted to talk about AAM and eVTOL. And growing up in a very congested metropolitan area like I have here in New York City, and I have lived essentially most of my life in or around New York City, and you see how the other half lives, right? Not there's better or worse, but for all those, the millions and millions of people that live in the city, obviously GA, that's kind of out. That's not really a legit option. Even the airspace is heavily restricted as well. So it's just not a great place to fly a plane or a helicopter or learn how to fly. But what we do have a need for is to kind of get around traffic. And that's where I saw, even with the limitations with battery power for the eVTOLs, shuttling in between basically certain urban centers and the airport, or from one urban center to another, an ability to fly faster and then traffic will allow, and at a reasonable cost. That's why I realized that eVTOL does have a future, and part of the reason why I got so high on it and started tracking it so many years ago. But there is also another chapter here as well, which I guess I can just segue into. So around 2017 or so, I connected with a startup called Flyado, on-demand ride-hail service for general aviation, piston aircraft, not for jets. So the thought was, here we have all these general GA airports, around the country, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, underutilized. Let's see if we can get people, and piston aircraft are cheaper per operating hour than a turbine, right?
Oh yeah.
So let's see if we can get here, get an app on demand, book a flight. Basically, if you're driving 7 hours or so, this is going to get you there much faster. It caught on for a moment, and then we lost steam, and then we went out of the business. But while I was there, I realized this is when eVTOL was just kind of, it was starting to make waves right now, mostly concepts, nothing that was really flying. But I'm like, this is what's needed. The problem with Flyado was that it was mostly predicated on working in these sort of rural areas where all these airports were and no people were, or not enough to make it financially viable.
Sure.
The financially viable is here in the urban centers. So if you can lower the cost per mile and make it safe, I saw a future for eVTOL, and that's the reason why I started kind of getting excited about it.
Yeah, so you're definitely a proponent for eVTOL. Just for our listeners who may be new to the sector, new to the space, let's just start from the basics. What is eVTOL?
Electric vertical takeoff and landing. So it is, rotary wing, powered by electricity. Of course, it can be hydrogen, a hybrid type of system as well. We could get into the weeds on that. But that's basically all these drones. By the way, I started off, I got a DJI Phantom, over 10 years ago when they first came out as well. And so I'm a video producer by trade as well. So I'm a producer. That's why that's kind of got me into podcasting. And I realized, back in the day, if you wanted an aerial shot, you either rented this jib for like $10,000 a day, or you hired a helicopter. Then all of a sudden, wait, there's this like little toy thing that this Chinese company DJI is offering. It's got this gimbal, this concept that it kind of balances the camera and it stabilizes it. Like, oh my God, every filmmaker out there started realizing, hey, I don't need that. I could do all of this, get these aerial shots for peanuts, for next to nothing. So I saw that, and I saw the power of these drones. I realized an eVTOL is essentially a scaled up version of the drones that are so wildly popular these days. So that's the beginning of what an eVTOL is. Now, that said, we can get into certification because the FAA was like, we don't know how to certify this. They had to invent the process of certification. EASA and FAA have been working. They were slow. They were really dragging their feet for a while. At least it seemed that way from appearances on the outside. They are moving right now. And Joby famously is on its way, is probably going to be the first eVTOL to be truly certified. So obviously from the helicopter perspective, you can look at eVTOL and say, all right, this is a threat. This is going to eat into our business. It's going to eat into my livelihood. And I'm here to say that you're right and you're wrong at the same time. Helicopters are not going to be obsolete anytime soon. They are not. You're not going out of business. The helicopters are here to stay. But on the periphery, it is going to eat into the margins. It is already. I can tell you right now in the film and television business now, hiring a helicopter for a shot is a rare event. But if you need the lift and you need the duration, the payload, then that's where helicopters still come in handy. There are still severe limitations on duration, distance that you can fly on battery power alone. It's the same thing. I host the Urban EV podcast. That's about cars. But all I do is get into the weeds about the user experience for driving an EV. And the challenges that people have from converting from an ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine, to an EV, and one of them, it starts with range, right? You pour gas, you can load up your F-150, with 20 gallons plus of gas, and it'll take you, even with bad gas mileage, you'll still go 400 miles probably. You know, the best case scenario for most EVs on the highway is about 300 miles. So you take a haircut. It takes longer to fill up the battery with electrons than it does filling up your tank. At least for now, things are changing. But we have the same challenges with eVTOL as well. So they are coming. I can get into all of the developments as well. I don't know how geeky you want me to get on this, but eVTOL is electric vertical takeoff and landing. That was the most long-winded answer in the history of the world.
No, I love it. No, it's perfect. And again, something that I love about this conversation here is it's, again, a little bit out of my expertise. Actually, a lot of it. I'm not really huge into eVTOL. Not saying that I'm for it or even against it. I'm just kind of like, I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Last year there was a big rebranding, right? For 75 years, we had the HAI, which was the Helicopter Association International,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was the HAI Heli Expo. That's what it always was. And then last year they rebranded it to Verticon, VAI,
Mm-hmm.
vertical aviation, right? So I was like, man, so it does seem like as an industry, we are starting to try to adopt this new reality that eVTOL will eventually be within this space, right? I remember the first time I saw a drone, I was like, oh, right? Like it's pretty impressive what you can do in a drone. And in fact, I've been able to learn quite a lot about drones recently. I had a great podcast with the Ascent Aero guys, the company that's actually owned by Robinson Helicopters.
Mm-hmm.
They talked a lot about the advantages of drones, some of the disadvantages still lots of rules specifically governing like line of sight and the distance that you can go, which is kind of making it very difficult for drones to completely take over some of the helicopter missions. But also this cool conversation that we had where drones and helicopters may actually interact together. So being able to deploy drones from a helicopter, and then they can set up a perimeter, say around a fire or around a natural disaster or even a crime scene, and they can triangulate and give all this data and then come back to the helicopter. So I think it's pretty neat, specifically on the drone side. But again, the eVTOL side is kind of out of my preview. So would something like the Beta aircraft be a eVTOL?
So this is where we're just going into this weird hybrid space. The first beta that flew, it looked like what they were showing was going to be their eVTOL model, except it didn't have rotors on the top. It was just an airplane. But it's an airplane that has 4 props on the top of the booms that go to the tail, and it will be eventually. They're developing both hand in hand, and they realize that, listen, that the big thing with a lot of these eVTOLs is we all know it's, especially with battery power, as I said, it's limited with range. So you want to fly on wings. You use the props to lift up, and then you transition to horizontal flight using your wings. That transition phase, by the way, is a big deal in the eVTOL space. Apparently, it's very complicated to transition from vertical flight to horizontal flight.
Well, and there was something recently, I think it was with Horizon, I saw that they had released a video talking about their transition from vertical to horizontal flight. In fact, I went on LinkedIn and I messaged the CEO. I'm like, hey, you should come on my podcast. Haven't heard back yet. Get back to me. Let's talk. But, that was, I guess, then I read through the comments because I'm thinking to myself, like, what's the big deal, right? You go up and then you go forward. Is it that big of a deal? And then you read the comments and it's like these guys had, split the atom or something, which is, again, that's how unknowledgeable I am about this whole space in general. And so it is kind of cool to see that these technologies are coming. The reason I ask about beta is I actually got to go to beta a couple of years ago. Me being naive, my buddy Ian, who works with me here at Helicopter, he's a partner in both Helicopter and my airplane brokerage at NAAB. He was like, hey, we're going to go look at this cool vehicle thing, that these people are building in Vermont. And I'm like, okay. And in my head, I'm seeing this janky hangar
Yeah.
with this janky like R-22 with something, I had this weird perception. I thought it was going to be a total waste of time. The second we get there, they're, taking images of my face and, having to do palm prints and all this. I'm like, oh my God, like this is a serious business. And the building was beautiful. And then you walk in and it's like, oh my God,
Oh yeah.
just incredible. And then you learn about the machine, the actual vehicle, and, where you can take an engine out, replace some components within about 10 minutes and then put it back in. Right. And then it's completely overhauled, all these crazy things. And then I actually got to fly the simulator, and I left thinking, oh my God, that's insane. I mean, my wife could have got in the simulator and she could have easily flown it, no problem. And
or you could go, or you could just talk about Whisk. There is no pilot. No one flies it. It's technology now. It's kind of incredible how many tools it gives you, and it's not even an engine; it's a motor. It's very simplified. Everything is run with servos. Everything is powered by, multiple CPUs. I'm sure there's plenty of redundancy, but you take all the mechanical aspects out of it. They're simplifying it. Far fewer parts, which we all know from helicopters. There's a lot of moving parts. This is
totally
a big deal. It's like when I was learning the pre-flight on the R-22, I'm like, this is the Jesus nut. I'm like, I already understand why you're calling it that.
Jesus. That's funny. So other than certification, which I do want to talk about, what are some of the other counter arguments against eVTOL?
Well, it's, I think what it is, the proponents, the fanboys of eVTOL, right? It's taken over the world. Everything's going to be eVTOL. It's going to replace everything. We're not going to have to drive cars anymore. Everyone's going to be flying highways in the sky. And what people very quickly realize is, or people always knew, but were in denial about it, is community acceptance is a huge factor with having a vertiport in your backyard. I live in Brooklyn. There was a time where I used to go out when I was younger, I was single, I'd go out to the Hamptons, get share houses, had a great time out there. I've flown into East Hampton Airport as well when I was actively flying. Beautiful out there.
Gorgeous.
And, that's, yeah. And have you been out there as well?
Yeah, so my family's actually all from Long Island. They grew up in Cold Spring Harbor, Huntington area. And so all of my extended family's back there. So I was not born in New York. I was born in Oregon, but mom and dad are true New Yorkers. In fact, they've been here for 40 years, and my dad still sounds like a New Yorker.
You can't get it out of your system. Yeah, no, it's like infects you. And hopefully he's not a Jets fan, but unfortunately a lot of Long Islanders are. So
he's actually a Giants fan.
I don't know if that's any better, actually.
I don't think it is.
No. These days, it's actually from bad to worse.
They're both horrible.
They are horrible, horrible, horrible teams. I had my son, he's already 12 right now. When he was a baby, a cousin of my wife's bought him a Jets jersey. I put him in it and took a picture, put it on social media. And the first comment was, that's child abuse.
Come on now.
But getting back to the Hamptons, so it's the home of millionaires, forget it, billionaires are living out there. And so there were a lot of helicopter flights, particularly in the weekends over the summer. And they tried to legislate out. They've tried to basically shut down the airport. They're just doing everything in their power to get rid of those helicopters from flying low over these millionaire and billionaire homes. They just can't stand the noise. So one nice thing about eVTOL is a lot quieter, not silent, but a lot quieter than a helicopter, but still the downwash, the commotion, the congestion. There's a big community acceptance thing. You cannot just wave your magic wand and just have heliports, vertiports sprinkled throughout the city, even if these things are quieter. And we all know for sure the moment there's an accident, everyone's like, that's it. We're out. No more. We're going to ban these things. I'm old enough to remember when I was a child, the Pan Am building in Midtown Manhattan. It's now the MetLife building. They had a vertiport over there, a heliport on the top. New York Airways. They flew these giant Chinook. I think they were like civilian Chinooks, if I'm not mistaken. They were.
I don't know exactly what they were. They were a tandem rotor helicopter.
Yeah. And they were running those things to the airport. It made perfect sense to JFK once again, just like it makes sense now, You could probably get there in 5 minutes as opposed to 45 minutes plus to get there by, by bus, by taxi, by subway, whatever your mode of transportation. It's not going to be easy. They had an accident. It was a fatality there. The landing gear collapsed. Someone was killed on Park Avenue. The debris and the blade fell down. Horrible. And that was it. Over. New York City, like no more helicopters. And every once in a while, we did have another fatality on a tourist flight. I think there might have been some mass bumping situation. I'm not quite sure. This stuff does not go over well in big cities.
No.
Tolerance is like zero.
Well, in fact, yeah, I mean, you talk about that horrible accident recently over the Hudson. The next day you have, our elected officials in Washington saying, all these things that are really crazy, right? That two-bladed rotors are dangerous and all these things that they don't know what they're talking about, but they have a platform and they have power, right? So this idea of acceptance is important. Whether the person pushing it doesn't know what the heck they're talking about or not,
yeah,
they can legitimately make a movement. I mean, we've seen that with general aviation airports, specifically on the West Coast, right?
Santa Monica.
Santa Monica is getting shut down. Crazy curfews and restrictions for airports in California and Oregon, where I live. This is all scary things, and it's all created by some very, very loud voices.
Yeah.
So if you were running an eVTOL business, or you were the spokesman for eVTOL, how do you get that community acceptance?
Obviously, it's going to be grassroots. It's going to be challenging. As a producer, and I've worked in marketing. Optics is huge, right? And this is, here we are. We're on the the HeliCASTS right now, and we're talking to our closed community here. We're preaching to the choir. The word's got to get out. It's all about PR. We've seen this happen a million times where politicians, my God, every time there's an aviation accident, the misinformation that comes not just from the general public and not just from the local news, but from the politicians as well is staggering.
It's crazy.
And you're like, this was all right. So there was a tragic accident today in a helicopter or an airplane. How many people just got killed in car accidents or the same day? Like, that's no big deal, right? It's not as intriguing when someone dies in a car accident. That's routine, right? So, but if it bleeds, it leads.
I was just about to say, if it bleeds, it leads. I used to fly for the news, and right,
yeah,
it was kind of a depressing job because we only flew to really sad, bad things. It's like, well,
yeah,
if it bleeds, it leads. And so, yeah, I mean, I get that media component of it. It is interesting, right? I mean, helicopters specifically play such a vital role in our economy.
Oh,
I would say that actually most sectors of our economy, there is a helicopter touch point at some point in the chain.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention just the air medical side as well, all the lives that are positively affected. But yeah, I mean, when you watch a helicopter tumble out of the air, crash into the Hudson, look, that's bad PR, right? And I get that.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. So you're saying you go out, you introduce this new technology, eVTOL, to communities, you show them the advantages, you get the community support.
If you're passionate about rotorcraft maintenance, then be sure to check out Vertical's new Instagram channel, @vertical.mro, sharing all things related to helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul, from the latest podcast episodes to conference updates, and even epic photography. Vertical MRO is dedicated to supporting and advancing rotorcraft maintenance, the backbone of our industry.
That's the name of the game. That's how you would try to do it. I think what's going to happen, it's going to be a really slow roll. So right now they're going to have to use existing heliports right now. I think the vertiport expansion, first you have to prove these things are safe and reliable. And when people finally catch a ride to the airport through one of these existing vertiports and they go, wow, this is safe, this is comfortable. I didn't feel like this was like a hair-raising kind of ride. Then you're going to be a little more open. And once again, the technology can be proven that these things are much quieter. I mean, the downwash is the downwash. No matter what, it's going to be disruptive in the immediate area. But if these can fly over your head and you didn't really notice them, that's the start. And I think that's where, and the safety record has to be essentially unblemished. It's going to be a real tiptoeing experience for the first 5 years. Now, what's happening is the roadmap of the rollout of eVTOLs. When you really look into where they're going to be sort of where they're going to start flying first, it's places like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, New York City in existing vertiports. There's going to be air taxi, some cargo, tourism as well, but they got to nail it. It's like you've got to nail the basics first, and you've got to establish yourself as a sort of invisible but essential tool that people can use. And the safety has to be 100%. And once that happens, after a few years, you can start approaching community boards and whatnot, saying, hey, would you like to, instead of having to travel all the way over there to hit that vertiport, when you like one in your backyard, to get you to the airport? I think that's where it's going to always start. The natural fate is going to be the rides to the airport, because you're already in that sort of mental state of, I'm going to be flying. But then in certain places, like places where people are island hopping, places like decentralized cities like LA, you're going to see a lot more of an uptake as well. But much like with Santa Monica Airport, it wasn't so much a safety thing, it was a noise thing. As long as these things can be proven safe and quiet, I think that's going to be the first step in community acceptance.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we've seen this in other areas too. In fact, I've seen it in my own personal life. When you talk about community acceptance, Uber was a thing for me that I did not accept at first. Which is funny, because at that time I was in my young 20s, 24, 25 years old, when Uber came out. And I lived in Austin, and I liked to party. I had a good time on 6th Street. We lived it up, man. It was
to do it.
That was a great place. And the end of the night looked always very similar. It was a Friday or Saturday, sometimes both, usually both. And it's 2 a.m, and you got to get home.
I already know where you're going. I've been there. I've been there.
You hail a cab.
Where are you going with this?
Well, everyone and their mother wants a cab. So now you stand on 6th Street, and by the time the cab picks you up, you're half hungover, and you're at home at 6 a.m. and you live 20-minute drive away, right? And then Uber came out, and I was actually working as a valet in Austin, and Uber had decided, hey, look, screw the city rules. We're gonna take the fines, and we're gonna launch Uber. And I remember some Ubers would come into the valet area, and we were supposed to be like, no, you can't be here. Go away, you sick Uber. I hate you, Uber. And then my wife and I experienced our first Uber. We went to a concert at COTA, the F1 area there in Austin. And it was like, this lady was so friendly. That's the other thing, right? These cab drivers were jerks all the time. This lady offered us mints, offered us hand sanitizer. She had conversation with us. It was like, oh my God. And from that moment on, it was like the switch. And so I feel like eVTOL might be very similar, right? Where people can experience it for the first time and see how it positively affects them, because we're all selfish beings.
Yeah. And no one likes change. Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, okay, I see this. This is cool. I mean, from that moment on, I have not been in a cab. I will walk super far away at an airport terminal and walk by every single cab to go get in my Uber or my Lyft, because I just much prefer that experience.
It's uncivilized to wait on that taxi stand, wait in line, blah, 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 get the smelly taxi that kind of pulls up. Yeah, no, it's a sea change. Once you got your head around it, suddenly realize it was superior. There is an analogy here with EVs as well, which is obviously, like I said, what I'm talking about all the time here on one of my podcasts. There is a massive, massive pushback from internal combustion engine drivers who don't want change, who basically they're set in their ways, and that's fine. I get it. We're all humans. You get used to the system that you're in. You've built your life around it. It's fine. So it doesn't matter. And I realize this is one of those things as I talk EV, strategy, on my podcast. It doesn't matter to the average consumer, and this is the average human. I can tell you're going to gain 10 advantages by driving an EV. The moment I tell you you're going to lose something, that something's not quite as easy as it once was, most people are like, I'm out, just like that. But once they drive it, drive in an EV for the first time, experience all these positives, once they actually get their butts in the driver's seat, then suddenly everything changes, and suddenly they're much more open to it. And then once and for like 70, 80, 90%, the numbers are kind of all over the place. But between 70 and 90% of people that buy an EV their next car is also going to be an EV. They're not going to go back to their internal combustion engine. But there are certain missions, which once again, it's all about your mission profile, where EVs are not the ideal choice. You're towing your boat, hundreds of miles on a regular basis. Don't get an EV right now. It's not ready. And once again, this is also circling back to helicopters. There are many mission profiles here, which for the foreseeable future, helicopters are still going to rule the day. Now, eventually, I could see how power plants in helicopters, where you have the systems already mature and in place, hybrid technology is certainly going to potentially be a transition as well, for the in a true helicopter. But the EVs will continue to nibble into these markets here where range isn't as important and payload is not as important.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway secret word. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's secret word is swashplate. Visit contests.vertical, HeliCASTS.com to enter the secret word.
So I was coming across LinkedIn looking at eVTOL stuff because I wanted to be somewhat prepared for our conversation today. In fact, it's funny. I love learning and doing all this, but I get kind of nervous on these podcasts where I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about at all. And so you've been a great guest because you clearly know your stuff, and I appreciate that. And I think that we're doing it in a graceful way, right? Because there's also that part of it, right? There's a large community, in fact, a large community that listens to my podcasts that, eVTOL can be kind of a scary thing, a scary idea. We're all going to have to kind of shift our mindset. When I was going across LinkedIn last night looking at things, I saw an article, and the title is eVTOL Race Requires Warp Speed Push, Not Bureaucratic Brakes. Do you agree? Disagree? Is that a good headline? Is that a good article for eVTOL?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. It's the FAA, like I said, they seem to be dragging their feet at first, and it could have been a lack of funding. It could have been a less than business friendly approach, but this has to be done safely and properly. So it does require regulation. I think the FAA is the gold standard, EASA as well. And what they say goes. And sometimes, the federal government needs to pour more money to give them more tools to speed this up, but it has to go through it. Like I said, from a marketer, one major accident and it's all over. As simple as that. So this has to be done safely. We're all excited. There are a lot of players right now. It's predicted right now there's going to be about 4,800 eVTOLs in service worldwide by 2035. Sure, for everyone that's in the space, that can't happen soon enough, right? For someone like Beta that's working off of private equity or whatever, however they're getting funded right now, it's like they got to start making money, sooner or later, and it's like, Jesus, there's already been quite a few eVTOL developers that have gone full-fledged bankrupt. They're gone. No one even bought their assets, so that's really disheartening for everyone who's in that space. So I understand the rush to get these things to market.
When you look at those companies that have massive funding and then just completely fold, is that just a lack of due diligence on the equity provider of maybe not understanding? I'm guessing in this case, certification, right? I feel like a lot of these big companies are passionate folks about eVTOL. I think that we can agree to that. I don't think a lot of these companies that have been started to maybe collect a ton of money and then get out. Maybe they have, I don't know. But I'm guessing by and large, it's a lot of people that are super passionate about eVTOL and they want to move the space forward. Those people can be very intoxicating on a sales pitch, right? And I've heard about these big, even car companies that are funding these big projects. And, I think that they're used to different certification processes, timeframes specific to the automotive industry. Has that been a big reason why we've seen some of, these massive funding raises and then these big bankruptcies?
Aviation has always been driven by passion. It's a terrible business to be in. Just ask Boeing. It's like, no matter who you are, everyone struggles. It's always boom or bust. And some players have really done well, but for everyone that's made it, there's been countless others that have failed. But still, it draws people in because people are so passionate about it. It just aviation speaks to people in a different manner. So anytime you invest in a startup, there's always a risk, right? And you can say, here's the map, here's the timeline. We anticipate certification will happen by this point and blah, 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 blah. Whether it's rational or irrational, I can't say. You figure there's a lot of smart people out there. If you're, especially if you're private equity, you've got your analysts there, you're digging deep, but still a lot of people have made the wrong moves. No matter what, there's always a consolidation in any kind of startup business. And we're seeing it now, right? So we see like Joby, Eve, Beta, Archer, Vertical, Volocopter, Whisk. Those are the ones that are still looking like they've got hope. They're looking like they're going to happen. Archer, backed by United. They're like, all right, we see a path here. This does make sense on paper. But still, you've got to go through all the development. You got to get that transition from horizontal to vertical, vertical to horizontal. There are many, many challenges and unforeseen problems. So no matter what, all of these startups are risky, some riskier than others. But regardless, with many startups, you've got your seed funding, you develop a product. That's supposed to excite enough people to get more funding. Typically, you're not getting a blank check from a Saudi sovereign fund. Some people are. Some companies manage to pull that off, but it's rare. So you build a product, you show, hey, this is literally, a buddy of mine's an analyst. So he just kind of, every time there's something with eVTOL, he just forwards it to me. And Vertical, they just had a transition, a piloted, I think maybe it was the first piloted flight. They put a human being in it and they're like, boom, shoot this out to all the investors out there. Get them excited. We got a human being in here. This thing is for real. And it is exciting. It's a milestone. It's a breakthrough. It's not novel anymore to put a human being in an eVTOL, but it is for that product. And I'm sure whether it's novel technologies or maybe a certain market where they can kind of, where they believe they can kind of get a foothold. But regardless, you got a long runway. You're not going to be making income for years, right? Beta, super impressive. It's crazy, right? You go to Vermont. You're like, I'm expecting to see, Killington. It's a place you go skiing and you drive by cows on the way there. There's not a place where I think is you don't think of as an industry hub. Yeah, here you are they have it's a world-class operation, but they're not making a dime yet. They are it's all through funding. But that's a product I believe in as well, by the way. I think that's really a smart investment.
Yeah. It's a cool, man. The facility's crazy. The other cool thing about Beta is all their employees, you walk in there, not only do they have the vehicle, but they have multiple helicopters, multiple airplanes.
Yeah.
And if you're an employee there, they have like 20 plus CFIs on staff. And their only job is to train employees on how to fly aircraft.
Awesome.
And you can go flying whenever you want. You don't have to get it cleared. You don't even have a manager, actually. I think that's one of their things. They don't actually have necessarily I report to Rob reports to so-and-so. It's kind of like this free flow. They have a Michelin star chef, I think. A lot of craziness.
Dream. It's got that startup bubble type of vibe in a certain way, but they are the real deal. They are like a Google type of operation. They are going to be one of the major players. I don't have a doubt in the world that they're going to make it.
Are other countries that might have less bureaucratic red tape, specifically, say, a country like China that maybe wants to be superior in this space, are they surpassing kind of the development of, say, where we are here in the United States?
Oh yeah. Well, they got the EHang over there, which will never fly in the United States. You just see the design. I don't know if you've seen their quadcopter over there or octocopter.
Yep.
You have to walk through the radius of the blades to get into the aircraft. So it's just not
going to happen.
Not a good idea. The layout worked for a drone, and they just basically scaled up a drone, and they turned this thing. It's for real. It's flying already. No, they don't have the bureaucratic regulation over there. They can, because in the end, just the way their society is set up, and it's so uber centralized for the government, and If there's an accident, there'll be pushback, but the government controls the media. They'll tamp down the protests or the kind of the hype, and they'll move on. So yeah, no, they're going to advance. I mean, China, by the way, in the EV space, they are light years ahead of us right now. And I'm not quite sure if the average consumer understands the sleeping giant that is awakening over there in the Far East. They are light years ahead of us. So I don't have a doubt in my mind that even though their eVTOLs would never get certified here in the US, this is still their Gen 1 eVTOL. They're going to continue to develop. I am sure there's so much going on behind the scenes right now that you're not even aware of. When their next generation and the generation after that come out, they are going to be crazy players in the aviation space. I don't think that they've really leaned into helicopters. I think they've kind of relied on the old Soviet helicopters, and they just buy European helicopters and American helicopters. That doesn't seem to be their area of expertise. They've tried to develop the Comac. They've developed a couple of jetliners. They're kind of catching up there. They still have to rely on Western avionics and engines, but they've got electronics dialed in. They are the world leaders there. So they are going to continue to accelerate their programs, and you can be sure that the developments, the eVTOLs that start coming out of China over the next few years are going to blow your mind as far as capacity, range, ability, all of that stuff. So, they're definitely the ones to watch, but at the same time, no, you won't be flying in a Chinese helicopter anytime soon. Chinese eVTOL, rather.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, it's one of the articles that came across last night was kind of talking about just the bureaucracy difference between, say, here in the States or EASA and China. And so, yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how that develops. There's also a big push here in the States for certain companies to get certified by the time the LA Olympics are here in 2028, though that's about 3 years away. What's the over under on that? Is that a bet that you're taking?
I mean, they could certainly fly as experimental, but this is supposed to be like to ferry athletes, right? I'm gonna say it's gonna happen by 2028. I remember back in the day, 2024, 2025, that was the target. Everything's 5 years kind of ahead, right? But I do now really paying attention. Joby should be ready and certified by then. Archer as well. I'm going to take the under. I'm going to say it's going to happen.
Wow. Okay. Well, you heard it right here on the Helicopter Podcast with Rob that we will be flying athletes nonetheless in the 2028 Olympics.
Halsey, just a little tangent here real fast. And I'm going to say here, as me being this av geek that I am, I'm going to say one of the pivotal moments in my life, in my love for aviation, took place at the 1984 Olympics in LA. Does that you may not be old enough to really remember that?
I was born a little bit after that.
Okay, so you definitely don't remember that.
No.
The opening ceremony, they had a guy fly in on a jetpack. He had a jetpack,
Yes.
which was developed in the 50s, and that thing had a flight time of maybe 60 seconds. But they flew a guy in on a jetpack, and I thought that was the most badass, incredible, insane thing I've ever seen in my life. It gives me chills now seeing that moment there. Like, this is the future. We're gonna fly as humans. This is where we're going. So that was such a massive pivotal moment for me and my love of aviation. That moment. And so here we are.
Could really be full circle for you.
Yeah. Incredible.
You could have two of your most inspirational av geek life points occur during the Olympics.
In LA at the Olympics.
It's funny, cool. The jetpacks are actually starting to make a little bit of a comeback. My friend Lee, who is on the show, she flies the Candy Cane Bell 505. She's all over Instagram. I'm not sure if you follow her or are familiar, but she also does some jetpack flying, and we talked a lot about that when she was on the podcast. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, but talk about risk, that's the hang glider. I think the jetpack is a little farther up.
Yeah, I'll take the hang glider for sure.
Yeah, not a lot of redundancy, not yet anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I don't know enough to give my opinion, and it's something that I want to continue to research and understand is is really understanding the eVTOL, right? From a guy that sells aircraft, you kind of like think, oh man, like I just wish things would stay the same, because there's a simplicity to that, right? I know the aircraft, you know, you ask me about any Bell helicopter or Airbus or Robinson, I can tell you about those. And that's my knowledge point. And so there's definitely, even from that perspective on me personally, like, oh man, that's a big uphill battle. But, you know, I want to slowly start to incorporate this idea of eVTOL into my mental space. And I'm definitely curious to see where it goes. I've been able to see kind of firsthand through the podcast that certification is a struggle, not just for eVTOL, but for all aircraft, right? So I've had the pleasure of being able to talk to some of the heads of these OEMs, Airbus, Robinson, and the constant feedback is certification is bad. It takes a long time, right? And I think there's actually a big blame from a lot of those OEMs on the eVTOL, saying, well, one of the reasons why certification is so slow right now is because there's so many resources being sucked up.
Oh, so that's really hurting the helicopter space right now, and the aircraft space, the fixed wing, is because the resources are finally getting poured into eVTOL. All right, that makes sense. Someone's got to win, someone's going to lose.
That's a big argument, right? And so I'm definitely curious to see, right? There's non-eVTOL aircraft, Hill helicopters, something that I've been kind of following closely. I'm not sure if you followed Hill at all, and Jason Hill over across the pond in the UK, but he's building a pretty cool helicopter. It looks cool. I've kind of dubbed it like the Tesla of helicopters.
Is it powered by a turbine, internal combustion engine?
It's a jet turbine. It's a turbine that they're building in-house. They're building all their components actually in-house, nothing outsourced apparently. And it looks cool. It hasn't flown, right? They've taken in a lot of money.
It's a personal rotorcraft, or is this for commercial purposes?
Well, in the beginning, they're going to go experimental.
Mm-hmm.
That's the HX, and then they want to prove their model there and use the HX to get their HC, which would be their commercial variant.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's a cool helicopter, great avionics. Jason Hill, I've talked to him. I've had him on the podcast. Well-intentioned guy, very smart. I think he actually has a doctorate in, rotorcraft, aeronautical engineering. He's a smart guy. But my hang up with them is certification, right? They have a path to certification that I don't necessarily fully agree with. I'm like, I don't see that happening, right? And so that's where my current mental space is with eVTOL. I think it's moving in that direction. I think our government and our agencies like the FAA and the EASA, kind of like you said, the gold standards, are putting more resources into it. So I have no doubt that this will be the future. I just don't know when, right? That's kind of my big push. So definitely curious to kind of see. We definitely are starting to transition into kind of like the Jetsons era, right? Where everyone may have a personal flying aircraft. Then you have to start talking about airspace considerations and how this all works. And is it all through autonomy or what? So there's so many things to answer, but it's also a very exciting time. And, these vehicles are really cool. I've always said that Hollywood can predict the future. So when I think of eVTOL, I think of Avatar, and those crazy, like Black Hawk looking vertical takeoff, awesome looking crafts. So I think the future is that. So, excited to see what happens. And I really appreciate this conversation today. This was really fun. This is, definitely something where I can take away some points of learning. Before we wrap up, just tell me a little bit more about your podcasts, why you started them, what you're hoping to achieve, and, where people can find you and things like that.
As always, a special thanks to HeliCASTS for producing this podcast. Specializing in helicopter evaluations, faster sales, and superb service, HeliCASTS is the go-to agency for clients expecting immediate results. HeliCASTS' team of helicopter professionals are the best in the business. Using their aviation expertise, a nationwide network, and a proprietary 76-step listing strategy, HeliCASTS will convert your listing from Mayday to payday. Ready to get started? Text HeliCASTS to 1-855-HeliCASTS. That's HeliCASTS to 1-855-735-5226. And a HeliCASTS pilot agent will reach out. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.
Absolutely. So the two podcasts that I host and produce, one is the Crosscheck. It's a business aviation podcast. One of my colleagues, when I worked at Flying Digital Media, me and him founded that podcast. It is for that space. I know it's this weird, strange bedfellows of helicopters and fixed wing aircraft. It's like these parallel universes, but they don't have a lot of crossover.
Yeah, so true.
But once again, it was me being. I have a background as a video producer and some marketing as well. And it's one of these things here with just like you here. I love to talk about it, and especially because I'm not actively flying right now. I think I even more am motivated to talk about it.
Totally.
So I founded that podcast for that reason, and the Urban EV podcast for a similar reason, driving EV, the whole EV transition, sustainability, green energy, something I'm very passionate about. I also see it as the future with so many laggards, so I felt that there was a space to talk about it. It's getting crowded, but at the same time, we're starting to make our mark over there. So you can find us on all the streaming platforms, on YouTube as well. That's the Urban EV podcast, and also the Crosscheck. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Robert Hoffman. If you look me up, and obviously, if there's any reason you want to reach out or DM me, please feel free to do so.
And he's responsive. It's great. This is how this relationship started, and I look forward to continuing to grow that relationship. I'm excited to be a guest on your podcast.
Can't wait to have you. We'll turn the
kind
table.
of one of my pushes recently is to be a guest. It's funny. I've been a guest maybe 2 or 3 times on a podcast. It's hard. It's harder for me to be a guest sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know, Halsey. It's like I was wondering that. This is my 3rd guest appearance now as well on somebody else's podcast. At least there's very little prep that's needed. I feel like we have to research the guest and have a bunch of questions and be dynamic about it. Something that me, I don't want to basically clad up this podcast here going so inside baseball, but there's certain challenges being on either side of the mic here.
It really is. It's a different dynamic, but you guys are doing a great job on the Crosscheck. I have to check out the Urban EV. Obviously not a space that I'm really in, so I've kind of gravitated more towards the Crosscheck.
What are you driving right now?
What am I? I'm driving a Kia Telluride as my daily driver, and then our dog driver is a 2006 Toyota 4Runner with 300,000 miles on it. Every single warning light's on.
Bulletproof.
To
a certain point, I guess.
I'm telling you, it's like it doesn't leak. I mean, literally every warning light is on. I can't turn them off. They've been on for 6 years. There's no leaks. It runs great.
Drive it till the wheels fall off.
That's my plan. And it's our dog car. Our dog Hooch. Love him to death. He's a shedder, right? So it's like you put him in the Telluride. I don't have a ton of actually EV driving experience. We did actually recently. So my business partner Ian lives on the East Coast, and so I go 2-3 times a year, and we thought it would be fun. We were doing kind of a road show all along New England. Specifically, actually, we stopped in Long Island. We went to New York City. We went on the ferry. We did all this cool stuff, and we did it through with a Tesla. I had never been full electric. And it was cool. The Tesla's neat, obviously. Lots of really cool features. This had like the self-drive mode. But yeah, there's definitely a bit of a difference, right? It was cool because it would tell you where you should charge, right? There wasn't like you had to like mentally plan this thing out. It takes all the guesswork out. But then, you're there for 20, 25 minutes. Not the end of the world. Honestly not. We got the car back late on the rental night. And we had to bring it back with a full charge. And so, I was so tired. And I was like, oh, God, the last thing I want to do is sit in this parking lot for 20, 30 minutes. And you do it. So, there's, certain things that I liked about it, certain things I didn't. But I definitely see the merit for sure.
Yeah, there's certain strategies. For renting a car is one thing, and also you're in unfamiliar territory. When you're a homeowner, typically you will have a charger in your garage.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's one of those things, and you basically almost never charge on the road.
Because it's
charge overnight.
Yeah, you're just doing your daily commuting, and again, I haven't driven anything else, so Tesla's all I have experience. Very fast, right? That's kind of fun. It's like, oh my God, I had a client actually. He had the Tesla Plaid, I think it was.
Yeah,
and he took me for a ride, and it's like a physical feeling. Like my stomach went to my throat. I mean, Pretty
I
incredible.
rode in a plaid once, and my friend that was driving said, "Put your head back on the headrest before I say go, because it's going to snap your neck back."
Yeah, it's like absolutely insane. So yeah, look, there's so much of the future that's happening all around us, right? With EV vehicles, eVTOL in the aviation space. Man, I'm looking at this new VEO 3 from Google on like this video production stuff, which is just blowing my mind with AI.
Yeah, that's
It's like,
another topic,
ooh,
another
that's
podcast.
it's like amazing and all terrifying at once. I showed my wife this video last night. I'm like, "What's your thoughts on this video?"
Can't tell if it's real anymore. Yeah,
And I was like, those are AI generated people and was created with prompts. And she was like, that's nuts. So anyway, Rob, thank you so much for coming on the Helicopter Podcast. This again is a one of one, right? I've never talked about eVTOL really on this podcast. We're 30, 40 episodes in. I should probably know that, but I don't. And we've never talked about it. So this was super cool. I would love for you to come back on and we can talk about some progress reports of eVTOL. You can kind of maybe end up being our in-house eVTOL expert.
Sounds like a plan. I love it.
And I just look forward to continuing the relationship. That's what I love about podcasting is this connection, right? This thing that I get to do that gives me a reason to talk to people like you, Rob. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. If you're listening to the Helicopter Podcast and you have something to say, reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram at Halsey. I love chatting with you. I love hearing from you. And I love actually interviewing you here on the Helicopter Podcast. It's seriously something I look forward to. I record all my episodes in one day. So you're my first of 5 episodes today.
You're an Iron Man. I spread them out. I do one a week.
Trust me. My model, I promise you, might actually be easier. Like it sounds crazy, and it's one full day. And going into today, I'm always like, a little stressed, right?
Sure.
Because I also run a business that's nonstop. And so it's kind of like, oh man, one day away. But man, I love the conversations. I legitimately love doing this. The second I start talking, and this happened today, actually, I'm like, oh my God, this is what I'm doing this for. This is why I'm here, right? Like, I wish I could just do this all the time.
Well, yeah, I realize with podcasting, this is what I do with my friends with a beer at a bar.
Yeah,
just have a great conversation. You record it, and everyone wins. So
it's 5 o'clock somewhere. That's what I should start doing. Start drinking.
Yeah, there you go. Note to self, at least for the afternoon shift. They get the beer. Exactly. I get the coffee.
Yeah, I got lots of coffee, and I'm actually rocking. This is funny. I went on a Canadian trip recently. I went up to Canada. I flew a helicopter back from Ontario down to Reno, and I'm bald as you are. And I don't know about you, but I can't stand a winter's day without a beanie on. I always have to wear.
Gotta have a hat.
Always have to wear a beanie.
Yeah,
and they don't call it a beanie; they call it a toque.
A toque. I did not know that.
This is my Canadian toque coffee cup that I'm rocking today. So Rob, thanks so much for coming on. To our listeners, thank you for listening. Make sure that you go check out the Crosscheck podcast and the Urban EV podcast with Rob. He's great at chatting. He has things to say. He's passionate. He's an av geek, so he's the perfect guy to be podcasting. And I'm just lucky to have him on. To our sponsors, thank you guys so much for making the Helicopter Podcast possible. And of course, to our listeners, love you to death. MHM Publishing for the HeliCASTS platform. Go check out our other podcasts. You got the Hangar Z. You got the Real Rescue with Jason Quinn. So many good podcasts, and we're adding podcasts all the time. So check out the platform. Rob, talk to you later, bud.
Thanks, Halsey. Take care, man. Bye-bye.
See ya. Please stay tuned for a final word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
If you're passionate about rotorcraft maintenance, then be sure to check out Vertical's new Instagram channel, @vertical.mro, sharing all things related to helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul, from the latest podcast episodes to conference updates, and even epic photography. Vertical MRO is dedicated to supporting and advancing rotorcraft maintenance, the backbone of our industry.
As always, a special thanks to HeliCASTS for producing this podcast. Specializing in helicopter evaluations, faster sales, and superb service, HeliCASTS is the go-to agency for clients expecting immediate results. HeliCASTS' team of helicopter professionals are the best in the business. Using their aviation expertise, a nationwide network, and a proprietary 76-step listing strategy, HeliCASTS will convert your listing from Mayday to payday. Ready to get started? Text HeliCASTS to 1-855-HeliCASTS. That's HeliCASTS to 1-855-735-5226. And a HeliCASTS pilot agent will reach out. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.